something from a middle distance, it can be very ugly. But if you really go very close, it can be beautiful. And if you go very far, it can be beautiful again. As you probe into anything, it becomes interesting and therefore artistically valid and beautiful. Whereas if you stay away, it can be very, very trivial.
Satyajit Ray, the Oscar-winning Indian film director who died this week in Calcutta, aged 70. In a moment, we pay tribute to a man who's been acclaimed as one of the greatest filmmakers of our time. We also visit very different filmmaking territory with the arrival of The Naked Lunch, Canadian director David Cronenberg's latest creation. We visit a shattering new Israeli play, now bringing German audiences face to face with the Holocaust. And there's dance. Russian star Irek Mukhomedov forms a new company in Britain. But first, the life and work of a great filmmaker. Satyajit Ray was a director who filmed his native India with a passion and an integrity rare in cinema. In a career spanning 4 decades, he made over 24 feature films, many of which are now regarded as masterpieces. Ray was born in Calcutta in 1921. As a young man, he took a degree in economics, then went to art school where he discovered his great loves, cinema and music. His first job was as a commercial artist, but in the late 40s he met the visionary French director Jean Renoir, an experience which reinforced his determination to make a career in cinema. Renoir was a major inspiration behind his first film, Pata Panchali, which was released in 1955. A modest but beautifully observed tale of rural village life, Pata Panchali won a special award at the Cannes Film Festival in 1966 for the Best Human Document. Pata Panchali was one of 3 films about rural Bengali life, the Apu trilogy, and this is how Ray, a city dweller, gathered his material.
I've been observant of human behavior. I've been a good mimic. My years as an illustrator helped me. I also was for a period a cartoonist. So this helped in the study of human behavior, human speech. I have a good ear for sound, partly my musical background, perhaps, and I think I write very good dialogue. All the actors find it's very easy to speak my lines because I always have certain, for instance, if I'm casting, I already know whom I'm going to cast in a certain part. I would certainly write the kind of dialogue that would be true to character and also true to that person who is going to play that particular character. It's one of the reasons why the general standard of acting in my films is good, is that the lines are good, and they're asked to perform certain actions, go through certain behavior patterns which they find easy to combine with the word.
With me in the studio is the well-known actor Saeed Jaffrey, who worked with Ray and knew him well. Ray says that he wrote dialogue that was particularly easy for actors to deliver. What was your experience of working with him?
I was in the chess players. I was one of the chess players. He's absolutely right. I mean, he had a marvellous ear for not only music but human speech and so on and so forth. And during the making of the chess players, I used to do all my impersonations of Laurence Olivier and Marilyn Monroe, Marlon Brando and so on and so forth, and I can still hear his booming, wonderful, lovely laughter in the Indrapuri studios, because he was just such a very good listener and a marvellous director.
Ray grew up equally at home with Western and Bengali cultures, and he was constantly exploring this collision of influences in his films. Also with me is Andrew Robinson, who's written a biography of Ray, The Inner Eye.
His grandfather was an illustrator, musician, composer, and pioneer of printing technology, half-tone printing, who was described in the leading journal of the day as one of the great pioneers of printing.
But Ray himself was extraordinarily talented too, wasn't he? I mean, he could have been a composer, he could have been a painter or a writer. Why do you think he actually turned to film directing?
Just near the end of his life, I asked him whether, if he couldn't make any more films, he would take up painting or composing or writing full-time, and he said, I will go on working as long as I'm able to, because film is the most satisfying thing for me. The complexity is what he loved.
Because he could use all of his talents in the making of films, the writing, the sense of humour, the music. He used to write the music himself.
That's right.
It's very rare, isn't it, for a director to write his script, write his music, and work on the designs. Do you think that sort of self-sufficiency of his craft influenced his work? Do you think it gave it its integrity?
Yes. I've seldom met anyone who didn't want to see one of his films twice or even 3 times if they liked it the first time.
What he exposed to the rest of the world, I think, through his films, was the soul, the smiling soul of impoverished India.
And I would add to that the conscience of its people.
Yes.
And I think in the last years of his life he became saddened by all the corruption that he saw around him. And his last 3 films after he recovered are very stern films. They are funny in places, but he wanted to say something directly to the Indian government, to the Indian public. And that was that if you let your conscience atrophy, your soul will be lost.
How did he put his films together? What was special about his craft?
Total honesty and truth, no gimmicks at all, ever. Human beings came alive in his films, you know, whether it was a little village boy or a little girl. I mean, in Pasir Panjali, the line that little Dugga, the sister who dies, somebody asks her, when will you get married? And she says, Amar shadi to hobe na. I will never get married. And then when she dies, I cry even now when I think about that.
So he managed to really get to the truth of people's emotions.
You with the truthfulness about the human beings he was portraying.
And I'm sure Saeed would agree that on set he was one of the most natural of directors. You really didn't feel it was an artificial world at all. He was incredibly courteous.
He was the only man I've known, all 6'4.5" of him, who actually used to curtsy when being introduced to a lady.
Ray's won a huge amount of international acclaim. I mean, he was given a D.Litt from Oxford University. He got a French Légion d'honneur. How are his films received in India?
Because his films were in Bengali, and India, as you know, has about 19 different languages, so they were not easily available to anybody outside Bengal, except the cognoscenti and the connoisseurs of films. So, in fact, the man in the street, the average Indian, probably just knows of his name. That's all. And particularly now that he got the Oscar and the Bharat Ratna and so on and so forth.
The Jewel of India,
the Jewel of India thing. So, I mean, they all know his name. But not many people have seen his film outside of Bengal in India, alas.
Ray's just been awarded an Oscar for his special achievement in cinema. What were the qualities that made him really very great?
The great Japanese director Kurosawa, who was his friend, said a few years ago that not to have seen the cinema of Ray is like living in the world without seeing the sun or the moon.
And Saeed, you played in the great film The Chess Players.
Yes.
Why was Ray like no other director you've worked with?
I use an expression called a gardener director. A gardener director is somebody who is so confident of what he wants that he chooses his plants, which are the actors, knows exactly how much air, water and sun the plant would need, how much love it would need, or nurturing it would need, and then let the plant grow and blossom in its own rhythm and in its own